So the first thing we're going to do today, good morning, is we're starting with a reading about a new world. The first thing we're going to talk about, the objective of this reading is to recognize and understand similes. Before starting our reading, we're going to read the dictionary entry for dystopia and answer the questions. So we have that dystopia is an imaginary place or situation in which everything in society is extremely bad. It's the same as utopia. So utopia and dystopia, it's the same. Everything is really bad. It's a very bad situation. So this is like setting what we're going to see with the reading. It's like trying to set our mind in what is happening. We are going to read. So what's utopia and what would be utopia for you? Anyone has any idea to express, or we can look it up and show that dystopia, British English, is an imaginary place where everything is as bad as it can be. It can be used as an adjective or a noun. And the word was originated coined by John Stuart Mill from this utopia. We have that utopia is an imaginary place that everything is perfect, everything is great, it's heaven. Dystopia is the worst, everything is terrible. So now let's find some movies under this kind or books that have this kind of situation. The book we're going to read right now, or this excerpt of the book is an extract, has to do with this situation. Everything is as bad as it can be. It can't be worse. It's as bad as it can be. So we have to pay a lot of attention to what is happening. So we're starting with the reading. Everyone have to fix hair because we're going to find information after you have to answer the question. So Ashes, Ashes by Joe Tregarry. Before we go ahead, we're going with the glossary. Plague, a serious disease. What's a plague? The plague. Gorge or ravine, a deep, narrow valley with high sides, a gorge. Canyon, a deep valley with steep sides. Plateau, a flat area of land that is higher than the land around it. And a spearhead is a hard-pointed end of a spear, a long weapon. So we're going to see these are referred in the text. Would anyone like to read, or? We're going to go a little bit. 16-year-old Lucy Holloway had been living a normal life near New York until rising sea levels and floods, hurricanes, and earthquakes devastated the city. Okay, so everything was normal. She was living in New York until the sea level started to rise, and then happened floods, hurricanes came, and earthquakes, and that devastated the city. It destroyed the city. Only a few islands of land remained, and some could only be reached during periods of drought. Remember, we saw in the before in the vocabulary what is drought. Drought is when there's no rain, there's no water, everything is so dry. So these lands could only those that were remained, that were not destroyed, some could only be reached when there was no water around, when everything was during the periods of drought, because everything dries out. Then there was a plague, okay? Then the plague killed 99% of the population, including Lucy's family. So Lucy lost her family. They died because of the plague. Sweepers had started to hunt for survivors. So Lucy escaped and hid in the wilds of Central Park. Sweepers, we do not know exactly, but it seemed to be that is some kind of maybe a group that they are behind those that got infected or survived the plague, and I suppose is somehow to finish whoever is alive, so they won't continue infecting others. This is what I suppose, because I haven't read the book, but we do not have to stop because of this. In any case, these sweepers had started to hunt survivors. So they're hunting them. They're hunting them or to kill them or somehow to take them as prisoners. We do not know. So Lucy escaped and hid in the wilds of Central Park. Remember, the Central Park has a lot of green spaces, a lot of trees, and let's imagine that if this is fiction, everything is in wild. She had been surviving off wild animals and plants when a tsunami forced her to leave her camp and run. So she somehow could hunt, kill some wild animals and plants to survive. She was able to eat and survive through this. When the tsunami came in, she was forced to leave. Lucy estimated that she was around, she estimated because she didn't know exactly where she was, around Second Avenue and 92nd Street. Although acres of road and earthquake had been moved in the big earthquake. Such a big earthquake that everything disappeared, the streets disappeared. The landscape had been completely changed. Although it's a city, it's a landscape, a city landscape, because it's all landscapes, mountains, rivers, the ones we saw before. We have the coast. Okay, those are landscapes, sorry, not a river. Coast, countryside, but this is a city and somehow has a landscape. Had been completely changed. It looked as if a toddler had built a city out of blocks and then knocked them down. A toddler is a baby, okay, a very small, it's before 1, 2 years old, that's a toddler. So everything looked as if a toddler had built a city out of blocks, had made a city of blocks and had knocked them down. She had reached a gorge that was as big as a canyon. Okay, we read before what is a gorge. It's similar to a canyon, but it has another description. There was no way around it. She couldn't pass that gorge. She couldn't go from one side to another. When she finally pulled herself up the last slope, that's going up, she found herself on top of a plateau. Remember, the plateau is flat. Okay, it's above everything else, and it's flat piece of land. Straight ahead was a deep, wide ravine and a suspension bridge. So we said that a gorge, a ravine is the same. And there's a bridge, a suspension bridge, not a firm bridge, those suspension bridge, okay? Sweat trickled down Lucy's back. She was doing a lot of moving around very hard. It was very dangerous. So she was sweating. It was so high. The bridge was attached to an outcrop of rock by a rope. So the bridge, there was a piece of rock and it was attached to that through a rope. Lucy pulled on it and then stepped onto the bridge, which moved with her weight. She crept forward, holding on to the rope with both hands. Her eyes were drawn to the ground far below. She was looking really down. How far she was really high. The canal was almost completely dry where she was crossing, and sharp rocks lay on the bottom along with mounds of garbage. So there were sharp rocks down on the floor. If she fell down, she could be really hurt. And mounds of garbage. Mounds means a lot, piles of garbage. Part of the bridge snapped with a sharp crack. Lucy's ankle twisted. Her foot went through the hole and the bridge swung crazily from side to side. So the bridge snapped. It broke from one side, it ripped with a sharp crack. So the bridge started to move itself from one side to another, and her foot went through a hole in the bridge. Lucy grabbed at the ropes, burning stripes across her hand. She grabbed it, but it was burning her hands, the ropes. She closed her eyes, trying to erase the image of the rocks sticking up like spearheads. We saw what was a spearhead. The spearhead is like a long weapon that is very hard pointed at the top. So, she closed her eyes, trying to erase the image of rocks sticking up like spearheads at the bottom of the canal. So this is just an extract of the story, but this is what we're going to look for is the similes and the problems that she has encountered in all this section, let's say.